Hi, welcome to Atoms and Molecules. Let's take a look at what we're going to learn here. So the first question is the smallest unit of an element. And the smallest unit of an element is an atom. Elements are things like metals, like nickel or gold or copper, or gases like hydrogen or oxygen. And an atom is kind of the smallest thing you can get and still be the element. Intermolecular bond. Well, in this case, you're rarely going to see a bond where negative, the same charge usually repels. So intermolecular bond is what happens when the state changes. So when you're going from water to ice or water to steam, the bonds between the molecules, that's what inter means, is between. Smallest unit of a compound. Remember, smallest unit of an element was an atom. So compounds are more complicated. They have oftentimes different atoms in them. And so in this case, it's not an atom, it's going to be a molecule. Kind of the definition of a molecule is a bunch of atoms put together. So the number of protons, this is in an atom, usually equals the number of electrons. It also equals the number of neutrons. But in this case, we're trying to show that the positive and negative are about equal, so there's no charge typically on an atom. A diatomic molecule is a molecule, but it's got the same element or the same atoms in it. So there's just two of them. So oxygen is like that, usually hangs around with two atoms of oxygen together, O2. A molecule, that would be multiple atoms. Remember, atom is a small piece, and two protons. Protons are in an atom, so they're not fused together. They're already together in the atom. Neutral charge, well, that is when the pluses have to equal the minuses. So all the good and the bad must equal out, and then they're kind of neutral. If all you had is pluses and neutrons, which are neutral, then you'd have a positive charge. But in this case, the pluses cancel out the minuses. The protons cancel out the electrons' charge. Molecule. Molecule can be made from one element. It doesn't necessarily have to be two. Just the definition of what a molecule is. A covalent bond. Well, as you may remember, the electrons are flying around the nucleus of the atom, and if two atoms get close to each other, those electrons actually can fly between the two different atoms. And when they're shared, they're called a covalent bond. So that's a kind of a long word, but you can impress your friends if you use it and say covalent bond. That's where they share electrons. The nucleus, this is an easy one. That's the central part of an atom. And we just completed the first level of the vocabulary. So now if we look at some of the review questions. This is a good one. Impress your friends. Who was the ancient Greek who first suspected that atoms exist? And that would be Democritus. These are all good. Aesop wrote fables, but it was Democritus. Which of the following statements is true? This is a tricky one. All compounds are molecules, but not all molecules are compounds. You remember that molecules and compounds are both made up of multiple atoms, but compounds have to be made of different types of atoms, and where we know that molecules could actually have the same atom. So some molecules consist of atoms from only one element. So that is the reason that statement is true. These other ones are not necessarily true. What is the term for an element like oxygen in the air that consists of two identical atoms? This is one we went over before, but di typically means two in Greek or Latin, so it's a diatomic molecule. Which type of bonding holds most solid things together? That is our favorite ionic bonding. This is bonding that goes on between atoms and molecules. So this question is about fructose, and we know that fructose has the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen that make them up. And the question is, what is the smallest unit of fructose that retains the properties of fructose? And since it's made up of the elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, we know that we need to have something bigger than an element. An element's the same as an atom. An ion is a type of, it's a charged particle. So molecule is actually the fructose molecule has the properties of fructose, but not an element, an atom, or an ion. Which type of bonding occurs when two or more atoms join together by sharing electrons? We went over this before, but again, when the electrons are flying around and bopping between two atoms, they kind of pull the atoms together, and that's a bond called a covalent bond. What is the smallest unit of a compound that maintains the characteristics of a compound? Certainly not an atom. An acid is a different thing. So again, in this case, it is a molecule. Remember, compound is made up of different atoms. What particles have very little mass and are generally ignored when solving problems with atomic mass? That would be the electrons. Again, it makes sense. The electrons are flying around. Makes sense that the lightest thing would be flying around the most. And in fact, the atomic weight is mostly protons and neutrons. And the electrons have almost no impact on the weight. Which of these can exist as a single atom? Well, you can do an atom of water. No, an atom of water is made up of hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms. An atom of tin, however, tin is an element. So you could have an atom that is just an atom of tin. So that is our correct answer here. The other answers are more complex. So which type of bonds are involved when matter changes state between solid, liquid, and gas? We looked at this one before. This is not the covalent or the ionic bond. This is the intermolecular bond. These are the bonds between the molecules of, say, water, when it goes from ice to water, or water to steam. All right, so we did that. Final level, this is a trickier one. We actually have to spell stuff out. Just got to remember how to spell things and what the answers are. But it's a really good way to learn. What is the small unit of an element that maintains the characteristics of that element? That would be atom, as Democritus told us. The number of blank determines an element's atomic number. So the protons are the thing that actually define what an element or an atom is. So they are the atomic number, the most important thing in the atom. What is the smallest unit of a compound that maintains the characteristics of a compound? Well, as you may remember, molecules have multiple atoms in them, and they can obviously have different types of atoms and represent a compound like fructose that we saw before. What is the term for the central part of an atom? That is, you can think of nuclear reaction, but that is the nucleus. You may remember that a biological cell also has a nucleus, which is the center of the cell. So a little using the same word in two different ways. And finally, what is formed when one or more atoms bond together? Well, a bunch of atoms having a party together, that would be a molecule. Ta-da! What did we learn? We learned about covalent bonds. Not bad. Good job. There you go. Hope that helped. Go ahead and try the quiz now. And I hope you are successful. Good luck.